You're listening to the Vint Podcast, where we bring you interviews and stories from around the world of wine and spirits. From winemakers and critics to sommeliers and master distillers, we'll explore the people and businesses who are instrumental in shaping the future of today's food and drinks culture. Enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast, a production of the Vint Marketplace, your source for premium wine and spirits at vintmarketplace.com. This episode is presented by Coravin. Coravin is the world leader in at-home wine preservation, allowing you to pour a glass of your favorite wine and enjoy more bottles in your cellar without having to pop the cork. And we've recently wrapped up our latest giveaway of a Coravin Timeless wine preservation system. And the Vint Podcast listener who will receive the Coravin is Adam W. from out near Redlands, California. Thanks for tuning in, Adam, and for all of your great suggestions. We'll be in touch soon and let you know how we can get that Coravin over to you. Look forward to hearing about all the wines that you taste. And thank you to everyone who reached out, commented on our YouTube videos for this specific giveaway, and everyone who has supported the revamp and relaunch of our YouTube content. Billy's been doing a lot of work on that, and I should bring him into the fold here. Billy, how are you doing?
Doing well. And if you, just to add on to the Coravin giveaway part, if you missed out this time, have no fear. We have a few more coming up before the end of the year. Continue to enter and you have a good chance. But yeah, no, I'm doing very well. I'm excited to see everybody watching the YouTube. We're continuing to evolve and learn. We have a lot in the hopper, which is really exciting. So I'm excited to have people stay tuned. We're going to try different types of content. Right now, we've been focusing a lot of wines that are on the website. Soon we have some of my personal story coming up. Adam's going to share some of that. We're going to have some whiskey content, some little bit of history, some fun facts that I've been working on as well. So I think it's a really fun project, and I'm excited to see it grow.
Yeah, and Billy's sending me down with a camera and a tripod to our facility in Washington, D.C. I'll be shooting some whiskey content with some of our other folks here on the Vint team, and excited to get involved in the cast extracurricular content as well.
Oh yeah, everybody should be excited about that, because in that storage facility we have over $1 million of whiskey. So Brady's going to be bringing us some shots of some really special whiskeys and showing us the bottles and talking about them. And then, yeah, we'll be handling more on the wine side. Also, speaking of the wine side, you guys should check out our latest video on Pinot Noir outside of France. This is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, because I just like to publicize lesser known regions, as everybody knows. So we talk about wines, Pinot Noir from Germany, which is something I just wanted to talk about with more people because they're making amazing wines. And along with Germany, we have New Zealand, Oregon, and Sonoma, as well as some other special honorable mentions. But we highlight some producers from each region and talk about why We talk about why each region is unique and special and able to provide that wide swath of high quality Pinot Noir that they can. So definitely go check that out, learn a little bit about each region, and see some producer recommendations.
There's a great producer in Virginia that's making, I think, really good Pinot Noir, and Keto Ridge. So they're all over.
I didn't know there were any Pinot Noir producers in Virginia. But yeah, the idea with this too, and our recommendations are really centered on this, are collectible and ageable Pinot Noirs. So these aren't just, there is really quality Pinot Noir grown all over, even outside of Burgundy and France as well. But the goal with this is, where can you find collectible quality that might parallel some, maybe not necessarily the top tier in Burgundy, but close to there from different regions. So that's where our recommendations come from. And all of the wine that we talk about is also available on the Vint Marketplace. So it all comes full circle.
Yeah, I sent Billy a text last night showing him that I was drinking Burgundy and eating mushrooms and pork roast last night. I was like, wow, Burgundy on a Monday. I think that I've hit some kind of milestone. I don't know. We definitely don't make a habit of drinking Burgundy through the week, but that was a nice treat.
Speaking of Burgundy then, for the news today, we have a Hospice de Beaune update. So question for you before I go into the update. Did you know that the Hospice de Beaune is technically a domain that makes wine?
No. Is it it's not like a co-op or anything? It's not that sort of thing?
Well, not exactly. So over the years, I guess the organization, the Hospice de Civil de Beaune, has been gifted plots of land throughout Burgundy by different producers over the years. And I didn't really realize this myself. I thought they were just aggregating wines from different people and then selling them at the Hospice de Beaune auction. It turns out over the years, they've been gifted these plots of land, they farm them, and then they make wine from them. And that is what they're auctioning off. And they give all that money to charity at the end. So the news, So I did not know. So I think that might show my wine ignorance. Always shows you there's something more to learn. But so this article was all about how all of their farming in the land that they've been farming is now organic. But it was like, to me, bearing the lead, I was like, wait a minute, they make all of their own wine. So that was pretty cool. I'm glad to hear that and know that before trying to go there someday. It's on my like bucket list of wine events to go to, is the Hospice de Beaune event, like festivities every November. So now I know I'm happy to know I'm not like a noob that I won't know that they aren't making it around.
So producers, they're not just like giving them fruit from specific blocks in the vineyards. They're actually like deeding over land to them. Is that how you read it?
Over the years, I knew that kind of was a thing. They've donated them, but I didn't know if like they still farm them and then the fruit just went to them. I think that's happening less and less as it's become more Burgundy's so expensive now. But they do have their own plots, and I'm going to have to there's surprisingly little info about all of the individual wines, but it's pretty cool. And then I guess when you see bottlings, like we have some bottlings from the Hospice de Beaune on our site, that's when they'll make a base wine, and then the final raising will be finished by that specific producers. And that way they can put their own label on it as well. So that is,
our Burgundy expert podcast listeners should jump in the comments on YouTube and give us more. I'm sure there's things that we're leaving out, or tell us how uninformed we are for not having known that beforehand. Maybe someday people will gift us vineyard land, and we'll be able to start something like that here in the States. Me and you be like Hospice Vint Podcast.
Hospice Vint Podcast. Oh, that's awesome. Or we're gonna be like William Kelly and just befriend some old people without kids, and hopefully they'll just sell it to us.
Yeah, that's right. Would you like our land for $3 an acre? Yep. Let's hop into our guests today. We shouldn't spend any longer going without having her bring her voice into the conversation. When you talk about high-powered guests in the wine industry, I think Laura DePasquale, who is the head of artisanal wines at Southern Glazers, the largest wine distributor here in the U.S. She's certainly at the top of her field. Laura's a Master Sommelier, and really one of the impetuses for having her on today was to talk about how she's been a pioneer and a role model for other women in the wine industry. She obviously, you mentioned, has a high-powered role at one of the top distributors in the country, and has done so, I think, bringing other people along with her throughout the way. So, yeah, Billy, it was really cool to get to chat with her.
She certainly is a trailblazer, and she has a really great story about when she was taking her Master Sommelier exams and how often she was the only woman in the room. And I think it's a credit to her how many females are in the field now. I think there's still a long way to go to equalize the numbers. But when I was taking my intro exam, we're 99% sure that she was one of my professors. She was teaching in New York at the time, so we overlapped. And I know I had two female Master Somms teaching me that day. One was Pascaline Lepeltier, who she talks about in this episode, mentoring over time. So it's interesting to me that Pascaline is one of those trailblazing female Somms where she actually helped her get on her feet. So it's really that she's been a force in the industry for a long time. She's really built a lot, her own career, coming from working the floor to helping build an import company to basically coming to Southern, pitching them a whole new, basically arm of the company and bringing it to life. It was amazing and really inspirational to hear kind of how she can craft such a successful life in wine.
She's built one of the most successful programs there at Southern and has contributed a ton to the way that we experience wine here in the U.S. as consumers, for sure. And so we'll get over to that interview. But remember, if you're looking to drink more wine from your cellar without worrying about wasting what you can't consume, one of our Coravin systems, which we gave away earlier in this episode, will be your best friend. You can visit Coravin.com and use code VINT15 for 15% off your purchase of one of their devices. And if you're a member of the trade, you can visit trade.coravin.com for exclusive discounts on their full range of products and accessories for home and work. So now, without further ado, here is Master Sommelier Laura DePasquale. Hi, Laura. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. We are excited to have you on. It's not, I don't believe, I guess we say this every time we have someone from a sort of new sector of the wine industry, but we've never had someone from, such a massive player, I think, in the distribution and sale of wine here in the US, and well, spirits as well. So it's awesome to have you on, and another Master Sommelier. So glad to have someone else from the court on as well. Why don't you give listeners, just as briefly as you'd like, a view of your career up until the point that you started working at Southern, and maybe also cover joining the court and those kinds of things.
Super. I'm Laura DePasquale. I'm currently the Senior Vice President for Artisanal Wines for Southern Glazer Wine and Spirits, corporately, nationally. It's a pretty big job. I've been in the industry for 22 years. I had to think about that for a second. And the whole thing is a total accident. I have an MFA in painting, which really qualifies you for being a high-powered business executive in the wine world. I was pursuing a career in art in New York City, which is where I'm from, in case you haven't been able to tell from my accent, which I've never lost, and started working in some really great restaurants and really didn't know anything about wine, nor did I care. And I grew up in Manhattan, and I drank wine as a kid with my family. My dad is Italian, or was Italian. He's passed away. And then we drank really crappy wine, and I thought wine was disgusting growing up. And so it wasn't until I started working in some really great restaurants in New York that my perception of wine changed, but I still didn't really care. And then I moved to Miami in the 90s when South Beach was really just starting, still working in restaurants, trying to make it as a famous artist. Still didn't care about wine. In fact, I didn't even drink at all, any alcohol. But I knew that knowing a little bit about wine was required for the type of restaurants that I was working in. So I educated myself book-wise, and also winemakers coming into our restaurants and all of that, and still wasn't really very interested. And then by accident, a friend of mine was getting his master's in hospitality at FIU, and he came to me and he had this flyer that he pulled off the bulletin board, because this is 2000. This is 2000. And he says, "Hey, there's this Court of Master Sommelier thing up in Orlando. Can you go with me? Because you're the only person I know that knows anything about wine, and I want to cheat off your paper. And it's next weekend." And I was like, "Absolutely not. I have to work next weekend." He's asked the chef ask Chef Norman if you could go. And I was working for Norman Van Aken, James Beard Award winning, as a server. And so I asked him, and he said, "Yeah, I think you should go." And I was like, "Okay." So I went, expecting nothing. And there were these three master sommeliers talking about wine in a way that the light bulbs just exploded. It was everything I loved. It was art, history, geography, farming, travel, generational legacy. And the more I knew immediately, the more that I learned about wine, the more I wouldn't know, and that this would be a lifelong pursuit of study. And I loved that idea. So I went back, passed my little intro, got my little intro pin, came back to Miami, and Norman made me the dedicated sommelier on the floor. And so as I became a sommelier and really started to interact with business people, different salespeople, then managers and winery owners, I realized I should go on the business side. And after about 2 years of working as a som, I quit being a som, and everybody freaked out because it was the restaurant in Miami at the time. And they said, "How could you give up that job?" And it was pretty easy because I was literally starving, making no money because soms were not compensated very well in 2000, 2001. And I joined an Italian importer, which was Bombay at the time, as the Florida Italian wine specialist. And I knew nothing about the business. But as soon as I stepped in, I knew that I loved it. I was still pursuing the MS program and said, "Hey, I'm going to be a master som," and that's that. And then I started getting promoted right away. Head of the fine wine team, national sales director, passed the MS exam in 2004. It'll be 20 years next month. I cannot believe it. Eventually vice president of fine wine. Loved working for Bombay. Got an offer I couldn't refuse to join Country Vintner at the time and do distribution, which I had never done at any level. And here I am as GM, and the company's failing, and I'm in charge. And so I learned pretty quick, spent 3 years there. And then when they merged with Winebow, I decided to take a severance and pursue another avenue, presented a business plan for Southern, for the division and program that I run for Southern, and started here in 2015 and started in 2016, really in earnest, building this new division and this new piece of business for Southern. So that's my career in a nutshell.
Wow. I mean, the number of people who become passionate about wine before they really know anything and find themselves in a restaurant that doesn't have a dedicated wine staff and then just get the title of head buyer or head of the floor or whatever it might be is a recurring theme on our podcast. So it's definitely you're not alone in that journey, but it's a journey that most people are like, wow, I can't believe that it took so many turns.
I know. I look back and I'm just like, how did that happen? And I don't know. It's funny too. I don't know that it could happen today, right? I wonder if 20 something years later, I think it can in the restaurant world. I don't know that the professional path that I've taken, that I have, could actually occur today.
In the restaurant world, I definitely think it could, with probably more steps than a lot of people that we talk to have taken, because we've spoken to so many folks who are leading wine at like the local bar and grill, and then their very next job is a 1-star Michelin restaurant somehow. But I think that you could do 3 of those bar and grills and then get your 1-star job now.
Yeah, probably.
But you mentioned that the division that you're leading is that you submitted the proposal for when you initially got the role and that you envisioned, is that this artisanal wine division?
Yes and no.
Okay. I say maybe you can tell us about that division and about what artisanal wine means, because at least maybe I'm not familiar, but just not a word that we maybe often hear or use in describing categories, or maybe I'm off base. So
no, you're totally correct in that. And it's something that is not proprietary to Southern Glazers, but it's something that we certainly are championing. And really, it's because from the day I stepped into the business side of it, it has always bothered me to my core when I walk up to 10 people that are knowledgeable, right? I don't have to be Master Sommeliers, but they're knowledgeable about wine, whether they're collectors or consumers or somms or business people. And I say, or ask, what is fine wine? I get 10 different answers, and they're all correct, but they're really different. And it's always bothered me that the industry continues to define fine wine by price. And you've got a million different names to it: premium, luxury, ultra premium, ultra luxury. What? And it made no sense to me, because how do you tell somebody who is making an extraordinary dry ferment in Hungary that costs $20 and they're making 2,000 cases of it because that's all they can make, that they're not fine wine, when indeed they are? So what we decided to do at Southern was define fine wine and artisanal wine. And so for us, artisanal wine is categorized not by price, but by place and production. So where they align is family and legacy, terroir driven, natural winemaking styles, native grapes, all those great things. But we're looking for artisanal wine at production or availability in the United States as less than 20,000 9-liter cases. For example, Chateau Margaux is in my world. Do they produce more than 20,000 cases when you take the second label and the third label? Yes, they do. But what can we buy in the United States? What is allocated to us in the United States? That falls into my world. I would say what I do is really deal with the best of the best, right? The fine and rare wines of the world. And initially, my business plan was specific to Florida, and it was creating a piece of business that Southern Glazer was not in, right? They were in fine wine, but bigger fine wine. Great brands like Camus and Whispering Angel and Gerard Bertrand, right? But those are big brands, right? And they're producing a lot of wine, and they're still scaling in a lot of respects. I was really going after this boutique, on-premise, somm-driven world, and Southern recognized that they were not in that business. And the last page of my business plan was, and it could be a pilot for the rest of the country, right? Not knowing exactly what that meant. And so they bought it. I came in, I launched it in Florida. We were very successful. And then I was called into the C-suite during COVID when things were shut down. And I was like, oh, this might not be so good for me. And instead it was great. It was like, hey, let's see if you can scale this, right? So I was given incredible resources. Southern Glazer has incredible resources. So I was working with our Office of Strategic Management, which is Yale and Harvard MBA people, to create the business plan. We chose Texas as our pilot, our next pilot, to see if it scaled. We had a year to prove it out. We proved it out. And so now we expanded. Right? We have more. So my division is called Domain and Estates, and we're really in the battleground market. So Texas, Florida, California, New York, Washington State, and we'll continue to grow. And then working with and attracting those really highly aspirational suppliers, whether it's a winery or an importer. So I probably have the best job at Southern Glazer and maybe one of the best jobs in the business.
Nice. Yeah, no, that sounds fantastic. It's always nice when you create the job you want and then somebody else likes it and then it works at the same time.
Yes. Yes. It was terrifying and thrilling at the same time, right? When it was like go time, I'm sitting there with a blank canvas, essentially going, what if nobody says yes, right? What if none of the wineries want to come with me? What if they don't believe in this, right? What if they don't believe Southern is committed to this, which was a big obstacle, but we proved ourselves. So it's exciting. And like I said, I really get to do things and have met people that are just life-changing in both the business side and of course the wine side. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. I also came into wine. My undergrad, I was an art history major rather than making art. I have no skills, but I feel your connection there. And I've also loved geography and history. So I think that makes a huge connection and it completely resonates with me. For me, I guess, how gratifying is it for you to go now back to being able to work all the time with wines that kind of peak or hit all of those boxes? Because like along the way, and even now, my journey is not as extensive as yours. I've had to work with wines that they're not maybe as interesting. They don't hit the history. They don't have the fun art connection. So how gratifying is it to come full circle back to all those wines that hit all those boxes and really pulls it through?
It's such an awesome question. And thanks for asking that and bringing that up, because it is absolutely what feeds my soul. Working for Palm Bay, I loved it. I had an incredible boss. I was able to really create my path there till I got the seat at the executive table, as well as they supported my journey to becoming an MS, the highs and the lows of it. But I was working with wines that were more fine wine, right? Like that bigger scale wine. And in fact, I was calling on Darden, right? And creating things for Olive Garden in the last 3 years. So I was really, really in the business of it, right? And so that was wonderful. And it was an incredible learning opportunity. I also had the incredible experience of working with an executive coach, because Palm Bay is a family-owned company. At the time that I got my seat at the table, it was transferring from father to son. So an executive coach was brought in to really bring us all together as the new team and the historic team. So that was an extraordinary business experience. But really what I wanted to do was what I'm doing right now. And it wasn't because I wanted this big, huge career. I didn't really consider that. It was really about, so along the way of all this, as being an MS, I've done a lot of things and spent a lot of time in Europe, and specifically Italy. And Ian D'Agata has become a close friend of mine. And at one point he had this wine education board, and I was the American on the board. So there was a woman from China, another woman who's a writer for Decanter from Canada, Stephen Spurrier was on the board from Europe. And we were there every month. And I speak Italian. And so I'll never forget having this wonderful family that I love. It's 3 sisters. The youngest sister is the winemaker. The middle sister is the marketing and global sales. And the oldest sister is hospitality. And the dad is still very involved. And he pulled me aside and he says, I need to ask you a question. And I'm like, sure. And he said, I've lived a life I never dreamed of. I never thought Barolo it would become this thing. And that he goes, and it has provided a very good life for me and raising my 3 daughters and my wife. But these three daughters are now married and they are going to have families. And I can't expand this winery. And it will not support 4 families, right? This winery will only support 2 at most, right? Because what do I do? And how do I increase my distribution? And it's something that just stuck back here for so long because his option was to sell it. And he would create generational wealth, and then all 3 of the new families could go do whatever, right? But they didn't want to. The daughters wanted to be part of that winery. They wanted that next generational step. And it was something that really stuck with me. And I was like, what would Southern Glazers offer that a small boutique distributor, because that's our competition, wouldn't? And the fact is money, right? Prepayment, paying on time, offering national distribution, major distribution, just more resources. And I didn't realize how important that was when I presented the business plan. But I came to learn how important that was as I've pitched wineries and opened more states and pitched importers, how especially now, especially the last 18 months.
When you're, sorry, Brady, one more on the distribution side. When you're, I guess you must have your own sales team, because if everybody has their full book, like I know when I used to work for a producer, it was always like, how do we get the attention we want from our distributor reps? So do you guys, and even within those books, I assume you have a large portfolio. How do you break that up and make sure everybody gets the right attention?
So we have our own sales team. Maine Estates has its own dedicated sales team. They are really motivated by the portfolio, right? And so when I bring something new in, they're like, oh my God, I can't believe we get to sell, blah, 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 or taste, right? And we prioritize in terms of seasonality, in terms of market. We curate to the market. For example, my Washington portfolio, Washington State, has more Washington wines than any other portfolio because Washington wants Washington, right? And all those wineries are like, hey, can we have distribution in Florida? And I'm like, I'm really sorry, but I don't think we can handle another Washington winery in Florida. We love your wines. You're awesome, but we already have 3, right? Because it's not the same. Same thing with my California wineries. They're like, hey, we want Washington. And my Washington people are like, we can't handle any more California because they want Washington wines. And that's really how we curate. We try not to, as much as possible, cannibalize our own business within our own division. We really look for aspirational suppliers and aspirational wineries. And we're very opportunistic about it. Like I said, each state, the book looks different. There are some alignments, but for the most case, each book is unique. We sell more California wines in Texas than anywhere, right? The big, bold Napa cabs, because it's Texas. We sell more Spanish wines in Florida because it's Florida. So we really look at the demographics, and we do a lot of customer surveys, right? We ask our customers, hey, what are you looking for? And not the usual, hey, what are you looking for? What can I follow up with you? No, like, what's missing? What are you not getting? What is nobody showing you? What have you never tasted? We're launching a new Portuguese portfolio with a startup, and it's being really well received. And the gentleman that started it came from a big Portuguese wine company, but he's here in Miami and he's starting his own thing, and he's a delight and a joy to work with, and he's really bringing us some cool stuff. So we're always moving, right? We're always moving, always changing, always moving, always being as dynamic as possible.
Yeah, I thought that your comments about how your main competition is these boutique distributors and how you try and differentiate yourselves and what a distributor of such size that Southern has can bring to the table, because sometimes from a consumer perspective, and I also know sometimes from like brick and mortar merchants perspective, the large conglomerates, the largest firms sometimes get a lot of flack for either offering product that is like low rate or being stingy or in other ways manipulative about the way the product is distributed. And so sometimes you only see that perception from the outside. I think it's really interesting that you bring to the table, hey, there are so many resources that we can pass through to producers, to mom and pop shops, retailers, these kinds of things that you just can't find with boutique companies. And yeah, I know there's a lot of noise out there, and I appreciate you giving the other side of it, and just wonder if you have, not asking for a PR clip out, but like just comments about the perception of it is the largest distributor in the United States and the largest market in the world. what do you do about that, and how do you manage expectations that people might bring in when looking to work with you?
It's difficult.
Yeah.
And in all honesty, when I left my position at Stakehold Country Vintner, became Winebow, right? Southern called me right away. The GM of Florida called me right away and offered me like 3 different jobs. And I was like, absolutely not. But I knew the GM, and I knew him from when I was working at Palm Bay.
Absolutely not, because they're massive. I don't want anything to do with that.
No. But because the jobs that he was talking to me about weren't interesting to me.
Okay.
And I've been working and on my own since I was 16 years old. And I looked at that moment, which was 2015, January of 2015, as a moment for me to say yes to a lot of things that I was always saying no to, which was Ian's Wine Board, which was judging at Decanter, and the network that I increased in my life by taking that 6 months and coming up with that business plan was phenomenal. What I also knew was that I wanted to open my own fine wine distributor in Florida. Like, I knew it, right? And what I learned at Stakehold and at Country Vintner was that it doesn't matter how great your book is, what size distributor you are, big, boutique, small, how great your salespeople are. If you can't get product from A to B and B to C in good condition, you're not in business. And so my choice, rather than fund the thing on my own, which I had done, was I really want to sell this to Southern because they've got the logistics. And I will never have to struggle to build a container from Italy. And that by the glass placement that I made for this independent restaurant is only going to last a month, and maybe I can get more and maybe I can't, right?
Yeah.
Or I've got to borrow from Peter to pay Paul. And because there's no protection for suppliers, as distributors, we're protected, right? Doesn't matter if we're tiny or we're Southern Glazers. Every law in every state has a credit term, right? That the distributor gets paid or the account gets listed, right? The accounts are protected because they're protected, right? It's cash on delivery, but the suppliers are not. They're not protected. And suppliers are strung out months and months and months and months. And it's horrifying when you really dig in and find out how far some of them are strung out by slow pay or no pay. And it's gotten worse and worse and worse with the cost of business. It was very clear that Southern was aware of their reputation of being the big white truck, right? Mm-hmm. And part of what we've done with our artisanal division was not just bring in killer salespeople in a great portfolio, but we worked with our warehouses, right? And we worked with our trade team. This must be brought over in reefer. These allocated bottles of Ravenel or Rouleau or Margot or whatever right, we want to talk about, they need to be handled differently. They need to be pulled during the day. They need to be stored in temperature control at all times. They need to be wrapped so the labels are protected, right? We've done so much education and training. And then when we started to work on the project to scale the program, the first thing we did was hundreds of customer surveys around the country. What do you want? What's a good distributor? What are they doing? What do we do well? What do we do poorly? What do you love about us? What do you hate about us? And that's what informed the go forward strategy. We call that strategy SG+. And it is about not just the book and the salespeople, which is a huge part of it, of course, but it's also about what's happening back here. What's happening with condition? How are we moving wine? How are we storing wine? How are we delivering wine? How are we pulling wine? And it's been a huge learning curve for a lot of states. And I won't say that we move quickly on these things because we are a big company, but we did move in a huge way. Our Florida warehouse is now 100% temperature controlled. Our Katy, Texas warehouse is 100% temperature controlled, and it would have been sooner, but the power grid didn't reach until just 2 weeks ago. The equipment was literally sitting in the warehouse for a year waiting for the damn power grid. Dallas is 100% temperature controlled, in addition to the cold room and then the layers of process on how these wines are treated. We have quarterly reviews because warehouse turns over, right? People turn over. And so we do quarterly reviews and trainings on how these wines are to be treated and how do you read a wine label, right? We don't expect warehouse people to be experts in wine, but wine labels come in written in German, and it's not that easy for people. So it's been a huge undertaking. We're not perfect, but I think there's a couple of things to know and a couple of rumors to dispel. One is that we are a family-owned company moving into our third generation. We're not a conglomerate. We're not public. We're not private equity. We're not publicly traded. We're a family-owned company, which makes us a little quirky sometimes. And we do care, and we work really hard at these things. And we don't always get it right, and we take it very seriously when we let customers down, our customers being both the trade and our suppliers.
Nice. I mean, I think all of these upgrades and like kind of changes, I want to ask a little bit about different types of changes, trends in the wine world that you've seen. But I want to step back all the way to your beginning. Is there weren't that many female master sommeliers, I think, when you passed. And I'd love to hear about how you've seen the industry change and definitely hit some bumps, especially with the court down the road. And have you seen progress in what it's like been being a role model, like a female role model in the wine world?
So it's definitely different today than it was 21 years ago, 22 years ago when I started. I tell this story, and it's an absolutely true story. Like in my first 6 months of my job, I'm just like, oh my God, I love this business. It's amazing. Super excited, enthusiastic. I'm just doing Florida and I just think it's the greatest thing. And why didn't I do this sooner? And I remember going to my boss, how am I ever going to get promoted? And he just was taken back and he goes, what do you mean? And I'm like, I'm not golfing. I'm not going to a strip club. I'm not hanging out at the bar, right? How am I ever going to get promoted? And he literally looked at me and he said, I really don't know what to tell you, but I'm sure you'll figure it out. That was the answer. Today, that answer would never have, no one would ever get away with that answer. And I was just like, that was so not helpful. So I did have to figure it out. I was very fortunate that the company Bombay saw a lot of value in me, and I was able to really engineer that path. And my next boss, who was my boss for the next 7.5 years, was phenomenal. And he was an absolute coach and mentor to me, not only as a business person, but really helped me find my voice as a leader. Going through the Court of Master Sommeliers, in Florida, we didn't have a mentor. We didn't have a master som. No one had passed, but there was this group of us that came together, both female and male. So it was myself and Virginia Phillip, who passed a year before me, and then 6 other gentlemen that all passed. And we were like, no one's getting left behind. So we were this like bonded group between Orlando and Miami, like no one is getting left behind. When I took the final master som exam that I passed, I was the only woman there. And that was in Europe. That was in London. So I was the only woman as a candidate, and no one would speak to me. One of my Florida guys was with me. We both passed together. And I was a reset. I had to take everything over again. I had to start all over. It was my 4th time. I'd lost my 2 previous passes of service and theory, and I had to take everything over again. And I really went to London not thinking I was going to pass, thinking I would maybe get my 2 pieces back, fail tasting again, and then have 2 more shots after that to try to pass tasting. Turns out I passed all 3 at the same time. But I remember the examiners got behind on the schedule, really behind. So candidates were getting backed up for the tasting. So there were people I didn't know, and I'd be like, hi, my name's Laura, I live in Miami. The men wouldn't speak to me. They wouldn't even acknowledge me. It was like, wow. We all get together at the end, right? My friend John Blazon, who passed at the same time I did, and we're like, we don't want to talk to anybody. We're being very cordial, but we're like, we don't want to hear what you thought the wines were, because all he had was tasting, and of course I had all 3. And everybody's getting called up, and they're coming down, fail. Go ahead and called up. When I called upstairs, right? We're in the Dorchester, super fancy London hotel. So we're being called up this like grand staircase, right, to go into this room. And everybody's coming down like, no, I didn't get it. No, I didn't get it. No, I didn't get it. And they're not calling me and they're not calling John. And we're like, what? And so finally, this gentleman comes down that in my memory, which of course is not correct, but I've repainted him to look exactly like Inspector Clouseau with one of those double hats, right? His name was Percival Brown. That is definitely his name. He comes up to me and he goes, just wanted to say, I have to leave now. You've done quite well, but I just wanted to shake your hand. And he walked out. And I'm like, what does it mean? So finally, they called John and I together. We go in separate rooms and we're the last two. And as I'm coming down the stairs, and I've passed all three pieces. I'm now a Master Sommelier. I'm like, can't believe it. I just want to call my boyfriend, who's now my husband, and my boss to let them know. I'm looking for John to see his results. He hasn't come out of his room yet because we're like on separate sides. And I must have been like levitating down the stairs. And a gentleman had passed from Canada, and he was called up first. And he was very tall. He is very tall. And he must have seen that I was like beaming or aura emitting. And he looked at me and he goes, thumbs up. And I'm like, and I nodded my head. And I don't even make it to the bottom of the stairs. And he grabs me and he gives me a big hug, congratulations. And I'm congratulating him. And then all of a sudden, every other guy that ignored me the whole time is like, oh, congratulations. Oh, that's so amazing. Oh, blah, 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 blah. Right. And I was just like, really? So then I come back to the United States and my boss says to me, you have two choices to make. And I said, okay, what's my choice? He goes, you can either stay on this business path that you're on, or you can become this personality and we will support either one. But what do you want to do? And I was like, oh, no. I want that business path. And I want to be a glass ceiling breaker. I want to be that role model for other women. And he was like, I'm so happy you said that. I knew you were going to say that. Let's go. And so that's what we did. I will tell you that as I continued on that career as national sales director and then vice president of fine wine, I was always the only woman in the room, always, at every distributor meeting. And it got to the point, too, where I wouldn't allow our regional directors to introduce me as a master somm because I felt I was immediately looked at because I was a woman as not a serious business person, as like the fluff, as the wine person, as the geek in the room. And I just didn't want to deal with that. I really stayed on that business track. I really had to act differently. I would do things like I always wore heels, not to look sexy or pretty, but to be the tallest person in the room, right? I'm already 5'9", and I wanted men to have to look up at me, right? Because I'd be 6'2" in a pair of heels, right? Or 6'1", and I wanted them to or look eye level with me at all times. And as much as I sometimes would want to hang out, right, after a dinner or after a business meeting, I wouldn't. And that included in Court of Master Sommelier stuff, right? As I became a board member and then vice chair of the court, we would go to dinner as a group or as a board, and I would go to my room because I just knew that it wasn't going to be good, right? And I knew that my reputation had to be spotless, unlike any counterpart that I had, any male counterpart. And I always resented it. I'm now at a place in my career where, what are you going to do to me? I think I've pretty much built my reputation, and I'm definitely on the back half of my career. So I'm a little more cavalier, I think, not in terms of hanging out, because now I'm just too old and tired. I just want to go to bed, right? After dinner, I'm like, oh, do we really have to go to dinner? Can we just have a glass of wine at the bar and be in our hotel rooms by 8? Those days are behind me. And I remember, too, I used to have to, when women would come to me, young women, this is 10 years ago, would come to me and say, how do I have a career like yours? I was like, you have to keep your reputation absolutely sparkling. That has changed. And I'm so happy I don't have to say that anymore. I don't think there's parity. I still think we have a long way to go. I am the incoming chair for the Women's Leadership Council for WSWA, and I'll serve for 2 years. I've been vice chair for the last 2 years. There's a lot of mentorship programs for women, and that is really important, and it serves really well. I've been a formal mentor. I don't know. I think I'm in my 9th cycle in a formal mentorship for career development in this industry. And it's not necessarily fine wine. It's been everybody from category management to PR to trade development to commercial sales to logistics. I still think we have a long way to go. Certainly the Me Too movement helped. It cleaned up a lot, but we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, and in that story, you talked a lot about professional development and people that you met, and maybe they didn't give you a chance before they knew credentials or other kinds of things. And so the industry has certainly changed, as you describe. In that sense, has it also changed in some of the maybe like personal aspects that have kept women from participating more fully in their career in the past, like support for building families and the kind of thing that at the end of the day just honestly takes women out of the career field, because there's this tug of war of, okay, do I continue putting in 60 hours a week to my job, or do I turn and focus on this other thing I care about, my family? What kind of do you think that that's changed since you've been in? And do you have a family did that become a priority for you? Is it something that you have to struggle with today?
I have a fur family. Does that count?
Yeah. We said you're married. Married is family. And
yeah. I've been with my husband for 25 years. He's also in the industry, thankfully. And we went through an interesting dynamic, right? We met as sommeliers, and he stepped into the industry first, and his career was doing this. And then I stepped in, and then my career accelerated, right? So somebody had to take a back seat. And that could have been a difficult thing to navigate for us. It wasn't, but I'm fortunate and blessed and chose a prince of a human being to align my life with, who has supported every single thing I've done and never complained. I'm just coming back from literally 7 straight weeks on the road. I was home 6 days in September, and he doesn't complain. Maybe he's glad I'm gone. I don't know. Maybe I should think about that. Right? But we consciously chose, we knew we didn't want to have children, right? So that was a thing. I think one of the things, and I'm happy to hear women stop using this, because it's been a crutch, work-life balance, right? The reality is that it doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman. If you want to pursue a high-level, run-and-gun, high-powered executive role in whatever industry, there's no such thing, right?
Yeah.
You've got to figure out your lifestyle, right? And I've always looked at my job as a lifestyle job. It involves weekends, it involves holidays, it involves nights, and so you just live a different life, right? And if that works for you, great. If it doesn't, and you need a 9 to 5, then that's something different, right? There are opportunities more so in distribution for that 9 to 5 lifestyle than there is in winery or supply or importer world, right? But I don't think that that's a female thing. I think women were told that, right? But I think it's a male thing too, right? If you really, really want to reach that top. I mean,
you have to make sacrifices. And so for a while, and even today, people talk about it as maybe it's not, is it like a false choice? I'm not sure, but you can't, like you said, you can't ultimately have both, whether you're a man or a woman. If you want 7 kids and drive everyone to soccer practice and do all that, you're asking for a different lifestyle, a different career than, like you said, being an executive at the largest it doesn't matter what industry.
Yeah, it doesn't matter what
in the
it is,
US.
right?
And so, I think that it's wrong to introduce tension there for men and women who, it's like, there's not actually a way that you can have both of those things, probably, for most people. And so I appreciate you being upfront about that, is, hey, I didn't choose that route. I recognize that other people might want to, and my outcome is probably not actually for them, which is fine. But
right.
Yeah.
100%. I do think that the business side of it is more accommodating to family needs, right? And things like paternity leave and maternity leave than the hospitality side. The hospitality side is brutal. Ultimately, I left the floor not just because I wasn't making any money, and I really wasn't making any money. I was making $25,000 a year, and I still had to teach art on the side just to pay rent. And I was working at the best restaurant in Miami. I left also because my boyfriend, who became my husband, would call me on a Saturday at work, and I'd be doing inventory or setting up for that night's service, right? And he'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to go out with so-and-so on the boat. And I'd be like, great, and slam the phone down because I was so pissed that I was not on the boat, right? Because it was Saturday and I should be off, or New Year's Eve, or Mother's Day, or Valentine's Day. And my feet hurt. Right? My feet hurt because it takes a toll on your body as well. One of the icons of Master Sommelier, Madeline Trifon. Madeline, and I don't know how old Madeline is, but she's of a certain age for sure. She would still work the floor today if she could. That's how much she loves service and restaurants and hospitality, but her body broke down. She's had 2 hip replacements. So now she's doing retail and she's doing great and she loves it, but she misses the floor. She still miss. I just saw her in August, and she's like, yeah, I still miss the floor. And I'm like, you are just a miracle, Madeline. But her body broke down on her. She can't work the floor.
Speaking of known females in the wine space, when you just mentioned that, it made me think of Pascaline Lepeltier, because she's obviously still really involved. And I guess that brings up a broader question of, I think wine personalities, obviously, since Somm and stuff, they've been cool to be a Somm, and then everybody's in the critical world too is breaking out and becoming their own person. I'm thinking of, obviously everybody knows Jane Anson, but there's Jancis and Lisa Parati Brown, and you're getting a lot more of these names out there, and they're not just like necessarily behind the wine advocate label anymore. Do you think that's also helped get people out there? Because I think, yeah, some of my favorite wine writers, and we had Alice Firing on here, like some of my favorite wine writers are now women who maybe have been writing behind like Decanter or Wine Advocate before, and now they're out there.
I think that Jancis is an anomaly, and she is just the nicest woman you could ever meet. I don't know if you've ever met her, but she is so warm and friendly and just lovely, and not in the stuffy British way, like genuinely, right? I think that some of it, I think what is unfortunate is people, they pay, with the exception of Jancis, unless you go out on your own, you're paid nothing. You're really cobbling, and that's just journalism and writing in general, right? But I've written articles and I write them for free, right? Because I don't need the money. I'm like, pay somebody else that needs it, whatever you would pay me. And hopefully they do that, but I don't think they do, right? But I think social media helps in that, right? I think I know Pascal well. In fact, I mentored her through the MS process, and I still run all the Master Somm level 1 and level 2s in New York City. I run into her all the time since she's no longer part of the court. Social media was what's really helped her. I think what people don't realize is how hard Pascaline works in all aspects of her life to earn a living, And I think that's what's hard for women. I think the parity or the inequity in compensation is still a real thing in the adult alcohol beverage world for women versus men. And that, I think, is still something that the industry needs to correct. Right?
Yeah.
I think there's a little bit of they're getting this and this and this, and they have all these accolades and this and this and this. And it's, yeah. Can they pay the rent? Can they buy a house? Right?
Sure.
Can they save for retirement? Can they do they have health insurance? All the things you need as an adult.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that's great perspective. And you mentioned you were talking about your career trajectory, and you said that you're on the back half of your career, which I don't know if you are or not. Maybe you're making that decision.
Maybe there's something next.
Maybe, yeah. But just curious how, I'm sure that there's maybe it's like a bell curve. You start working, and then the peak of your career, you're working the most, and your career consumes a lot of how you orient your time. As you come on the back side of your career and you start thinking about what you're going to do for the next 30 years, yeah, what do you think that looks like as you consider winding down on the backside? Do you have a lot of travel in mind? Do you like want to open a little brick and mortar store on a corner somewhere and sell wine? What's do you think about that?
Yes. My husband and I are thinking about that because we both are. So we have another life in Savannah, Georgia, a state that Southern does not distribute wine in, like one of the only ones. And we have a couple of homes up there, and we love it up there. Yeah, maybe there's a brick and mortar store. There's definitely travel. I am not making wine. That is not in the plan. A return to the art world is definitely in the plan. And something in Europe is definitely in the plan, right? We just have to decide what. We always thought it would be Italy, and now we're like, maybe not. Maybe Spain. Maybe Paris. We don't know. But it's becoming less terrifying and more, because I work, right? Like I work. Yeah. That's what I do. And my life, my adult life has been defined by this career that I've built, right? Being a master sommelier, being a senior executive, building all these things, right? And being a trailblazer and a groundbreaker. It's who's defined me. And when I first started thinking about how does it end, right? How does the professional side end? It was like terrifying, right? Like physically, I was having like anxiety about it. And now it's not so terrifying because we've done the right things. We've been smart about it. And this wine world has created a very big life. So we have friends and close friends all over. My husband's also from South America, so that opens up a whole other place. So it's something that I don't want to say I'm looking forward to, but I am looking forward to because I still have a lot to do here, and I still have a while yet here at Southern with this project that has become more than a project, that has become an actual division and a career path for other people that have bought in. So my leaders in each of the states, right? And then the leaders underneath them and creating that bench. Your mindset shifts at some point, or it should shift at some point, that it's not about my next position, right? It's about what's my legacy and who is my backfill, right? How am I creating that bench behind me? And what skills do they need? What skills do they already possess? It's like building a team, but in a more forward-thinking way, right? And that's really important to me because especially for people that initially took a chance with this, that left other companies that I recruited in that were like, come with me, right? Come with me, right?
Awesome. I think that's the perfect place to leave it. Thank you so much for all of your time, and we really appreciated this conversation.
Thank you guys so much. This has really been a pleasure. You guys are so easy to talk to.
All right. That was our interview with Laura DePasquale. I hope everybody was really inspired by her life. It was somms like these that inspired me to get into wine, so maybe you'll be inspired to work in the field too. But again, this episode or an interview were brought to us by Coravin. And if you want to explore different Pinot Noirs from around the world, like in our new YouTube video, first go check out the video and see some recommended producers, and then bring them home and use your Coravin so you can taste bottles across New Zealand, Germany, Sonoma, Oregon, all of the regions that we discuss and the honorable mentions. And that is our episode for this week. We'll be back with another episode next week. Cheers.